Hello, and welcome to Daily Bread, Thoughts for Your Devotions. I am your host, as always, Pastor Phil, and today is June 3rd, Wednesday, and whenever you're tuning in, as always, thank you for joining us. The past couple days, I hope that you have been tuning in to what we're doing, following us on Facebook or on our website, linksa.org. We've been plugging into some current events and watching and praying for the things that are going on in our country right now, and for families and individuals and our leadership, and certainly all of those who are suffering. And so I ask that you would join us in that. And so I don't want to detract you from that if that's what you are doing with your devotions currently. But I thought that for the sake of what we're doing here right now, perhaps it would be good to move on and to finish this narrative arc that we started almost 3 weeks ago. So I'm in my son's room now. My oldest son. I have an oldest and a youngest son now. So I'm in Wyatt's room, and so if you hear some screaming or whatever, I know that we had some of that on Monday. Just please forgive me. But without further ado, this one, the final battle. So on Thursday, I believe it was, we talked about the farewell and the betrayal. Now the main character is either betrayed into the custody of the enemy, or says farewell to the people and engages willingly in battle with the final boss. This is the date with destiny that we've been talking so elusively about these past 2.5-3 weeks. It's like in Braveheart when William Wallace is being led to the gallows. It's like in Gladiator when Maximus is confronting the emperor underneath the Colosseum before being raised up. This is where we are right now. And to go forward means to engage in peril, means to certainly to suffer. And that is really, I think, the essence of what we see here, is that most heroes don't want this, or didn't want this, but sees that this is necessary. And so there's some tension, there's some suffering. That's what we see in the life of Jesus, in the suffering of Jesus. That's why we call it the Passion. Comes from the Greek word pascha, which means suffering. The passion of Jesus isn't this overwhelming love that he has and he feels really passionate and so he's going to the cross. No, the passion means the suffering of Jesus. And perhaps you knew that, perhaps you don't. You do now. So Jesus' suffering is brought about in order for us to see that he is engaging in battle. What I mean by that is there are at least 4 different fights that Jesus is fighting as we see him suffering on his way to the cross and upon the cross, this final battle. You see, Jesus doesn't fight like how we usually see people fight. He fights in a passive way. His words have been his fighting, his actions have been his fighting, and now his death is this climax in his battle, the reason why he came. So Jesus is led away from Mount Olive, and he is brought before the high priest and all of the people who are in power. And they ask him stuff. He's silent, and finally they ask him if he is the Son of God, and he says, "You say that I am." So here we see the second of Jesus' battles, right? The first one, he's betrayed by an insider, a close personal friend, Judas. This is his first battle. The betrayal is kind of part of the battle, the final battle. And then Jesus is fighting against his own people, the Jewish people, the people who are in power over God's people, understood as the Old Testament covenant. Then, because the state of Israel in Jesus' time was under Roman control, they didn't have the power of the sword, that is execution, they send him over to the governor, Pontius Pilate. And so we have an insider, we have the Jewish people as a whole, and now we have the Gentile world, the whole known world, being represented by this one person, Pontius Pilate, who doesn't find him guilty, doesn't want to condemn him, but because the people who are calling for Jesus' head are they're so tenacious about it, he says, okay, well, here's one person who certainly deserves death. Here's somebody who doesn't deserve death. Certainly the people who are calling for Jesus' death are going to say, well, kill this guy and let this guy go. But that's not what happens. They choose to let the guy who deserves death go, and the guy who doesn't goes to his death. So those are the three dates with destiny that Jesus is meeting here. And then finally, he goes to his own death. Now, I think that you could put in parentheses a fifth enemy here, and that's because Jesus' work on the cross is something that you and I have to relate to intimately. Certainly, his betrayal by his best friend, his betrayal by his own people, his betrayal by the whole world, we can relate to that. But there is something that we relate to as individuals, as the Holy Spirit calls us to. And so I think in parentheses we could put a fifth one. We can see in Jesus suffering ourselves where we deserve to be. He didn't deserve that. We do deserve that. When there's suffering in this world, we say we have someone who has been through suffering. When there's suffering in our lives, we say, no, that is not good. Why is it not good? Because Jesus underwent it, and it was bad then. It's bad for us. Even if we do deserve it, suffering is never good. But we point to the cross and say, we have someone. We have a God who is not afraid of suffering. So much so that he chooses to deal with it in Jesus. Now finally, the number 5, or number 4 if you exclude the one in parentheses, is Jesus up on the cross, finally giving up his spirit. You notice that all throughout this trajectory of this final battle that Jesus is going through, he is in control. He knows that Judas is about to betray him, but he still goes to Mount Olive. He knows that his own people are going to reject him, and yet he remains silent. Where when he was 12 years old, he went into the temple and he was teaching and people were astonished. And now he is silent before Pontius Pilate. He doesn't give this huge oration, which would have won over someone who was of Roman descent, but instead he just asks a question. Now he's on the cross. He's there willingly, by the way, and he gives up his spirit willingly. Now we only have this information from one passage in 1 Peter, but we know that Jesus then goes into Sheol. He descends in order to let the spiritual forces who believe that they had just conquered God and his best attempt to win his people back. He goes and preaches victory to the spirits who have been condemned, who have chosen condemnation because they followed the evil one. So here we have this final battle that culminates in a victory proclamation. And then shortly thereafter, within minutes after doing that, Jesus is seen. A resurrected Jesus is seen, is present on earth. And there is peace again. Now, whenever there is peace, it usually takes a little while for the disciples to know that peace has come. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow in the falling action. But I would encourage you to relate to this final battle. Relate to the people who are present, both the enemies of Jesus and those who would call themselves his friends. You can find this at the end of all 4 Gospels. And I'll see you tomorrow. And until then, I pray that you would be doing well, staying safe, and standing for what Jesus stood for as you follow him.